A warm welcome to you all. Jake, Crulee podcast. Thank you so much for tuning into another transmission. As I was just saying before this podcast began, I have delved slightly into ultra marathon running, but I wanted to speak with people who are in it, right? Who are competing in it, who are creating these events, who know the ins and outs of what it takes to run an ultra marathon, to train, to recover, to put it all together. So Norman and Jodi from GottaRunRacing.com, thank you so much for your time. And just for anyone who is listening to or watching this podcast, could you please introduce yourselves?
Yeah, my name is Norman. I'm the co-founder of Gotta Run Racing, which is an event series. I've been running for over 20 years, either adventure racing, Ironmans, or ultra running. That's basically it in a nutshell.
And I'm his wife, Jodi, and it's all his fault that I'm a runner. And we can get into that a little further if you'd like. But we love the sport of running. It hasn't always been that way for us, but we came to a little later in life and we decided to make a career out of it.
I'm just curious how you found us all the way over here in Canada.
I was reading. Oh, I wish I took the article now. There was an article, and they had a photo of you, Jodi, and you were wearing rainbow socks, running an ultra, and so they were doing like a breakdown of you, sort of talking about your journey and how Norman actually got you into ultra marathon running. So it was an article and it was a breakdown of who you both were and what you do. And then I checked out the website, and then I checked out the Instagram, and then I seen the podcast, and then, I reached out and I said, I'd love to have a chat with you both.
Wow. All the way in New Zealand. That's so cool.
So. It's funny because when we do our podcast, we don't think anybody's listening. It's like dead air out there.
Yeah, I mean, that's one thing that I think about, not that specifically, but I mean, the amount of entertainment or information that one can consume, like the options are just infinite. So yeah, I feel like it is quite and fairly unique to actually have a listener, to have a viewer, and to really just recognize that and recognize them and appreciating that for them, because they're obviously stopping in and they could watch anything else, but they decide to watch you. So, like, in regards to you two, how did you both meet?
Well, nothing to do with running.
It depends who you ask. If you want the truth, ask me. If you'd like a story, ask Norm. We met the old-fashioned way, at least back in that era. We met at a bar.
Oh, wow.
Now, do you want the good story?
Yeah. Absolutely.
We used to be professional umpires for tennis. I was in the chair, she was on the line, and during one of the events, I was not focusing on the match, but I was focusing on her on the line, so I wasn't paying attention. So that's my story.
Wow, I mean, that's quite a unique story. And then who did you actually invite each other to go for a drink, or was that later on?
No, we met at the bar.
We met through a mutual friend at the bar, and then he asked me out at the end of the night. I think you said you had to ask me twice.
Yeah, because she was so in shock that I asked her at least once. She almost fainted.
And then our first date was Batman, right?
Oh yeah, Batman 95, which is a terrible movie.
1995.
Wow. I wasn't even around then.
Thanks for that, Jake.
How about the origins of ultra running for both of you? So Jodi, you spoke about Norman getting you into it. So Norman, where did your origins begin?
We were watching Eco Challenge, which actually started in your country, right? New Zealand is the mecca for Eco Challenge. Adventure racing, am I right?
Right.
So we were watching Eco Challenge on TV. I think it was Fiji. not too sure, back in the early 90s.
Mm-hmm.
And as these teams were destroying themselves through 2 weeks of racing, and they were crossing the finish line, and they were crossing. I'm going, what a bunch of wimps crossing the finish line, crying. So Jodi said, yeah, I'd like to see you do that. So that was basically a dare that I had to take. And so I got a couple of friends, and we did this local 6-hour race, and I was dead in the first 30 minutes. I was destroyed. I thought that I was in shape. I was not in shape. So when I finally crossed the finish line, boy, did I cry. And I realized then that this will never happen to me again. I will never bonk again, and I'm going to make sure that I get in shape. And from then on, that was 20-something years ago, I never bonked again. And since then, like I said, adventure race, Ironman, ultra running, never bonk again. And Jodi's turn.
Well, for me, the very first running race that he signed up for was the Toronto Marathon. Not, most people, their first race is a 5 or a 10K, but Norm likes to take it to the next level. So when I went to watch him at the marathon, I didn't grow up being active. I was never on any teams. I never played sports. I just didn't enjoy it. But when I went to that finish line and I saw the ages and the shapes and the styles of runners, you have an idea of what a runner looks like in your head, but really it's not true. Runners come in all shapes and sizes. And I was so impressed with what I was seeing of people crossing the finish line. I thought, okay, knowing Norm, he's going to stick with this sport, and I could either stand at the finish line for the rest of our life together, or I could take it up myself. And that's exactly what I did. I trained, my very first race was a 10K. So I trained for a 10K and then grew from there.
Yeah,
Yep.
I'm interested to know because for myself, my first run was 400 meters. And then over time, I gradually increased it. It was like 5K and then a 10K. And then I said, well, let me try a 21, half marathon. And then I'd done that. But this was only, I was running on the treadmill at the gym. Mm-hmm. And then I, started to go further and further. And then I'd decide to run on the road or the path, because I think just being outside is so much more, it feels more freeing than running on a treadmill. I can kind of feel a little bit mundane. So for both of you, like, did you have something, an experience similar to that? Like, what hooked you to go like more, further?
For me personally, a friend of mine introduced me to the sport of ultra running. I was a marathoner, and he says, why don't you come out and run trails with me, which I did enjoy. And it kind of got me back to the adventure racing, where you're constantly in the woods and you're map and compass and try to find your way. So when my team disbanded and then I was by myself, I didn't know what to do. So he introduced me to the sport of ultra running. And funnily enough, my very first ultra race was the Canadian Death Race, which is the 125 kilometer race.
Wow.
That was my first. Yeah, that was my very first. But I backed it on to the fact that I was an adventure racer, which is a lot of hours when you're racing. So I felt I had the endurance. Yeah. And ever since then, I realized that I just belong in the mountains. I enjoy wanting to know what is over the next mountain, what is around the next corner. Yeah, I'm just an explorer that way.
How about yourself, Jodi?
I liked the result of running. So I liked how I felt when I finished. And I liked that I could eat that extra cookie or have that extra pint and not, suffer for it. And then I think once I got going and once I got up to the marathon level, it was kind of like Norm, like, well, if I can do a marathon, what's next? So I tried a 50K. I did a few 50s before I jumped up, but I've done 180 and 100K. I'm not sure if I'm in the mindset to go for 100-mile, but I'm not going to say never. But for me, it's the result of the running. And we taught beginner clinics for many years when we owned our running store. And I always told people that, because they would get so frustrated that they weren't seeing improvements with their breathing or how they were feeling the next day. And I said, listen, guys, once you break through, you're going to get addicted to how you feel when you're finished. That's what's going to keep you going. And once you start racing, you're going to get addicted to how you feel crossing a finish line. And I think that's true for a lot of people. We're always trying to recreate the feeling of the finish line.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm yet to do, like, obviously I stopped doing like the long distance runs, and this was during COVID. Actually, I began doing it. I'm not sure if you've met a lot of people nowadays who began because of COVID, or it was actually, like, specifically it was David Goggins who got me into it, and I was just wondering what he was talking about, all this running stuff. So I decided to start running, and having ran for so many years, how many events have you competed in, and which would you say was the most difficult?
Jeez.
I have no idea how many.
If you total all the 5Ks, 10Ks, trail, road, I don't know, but some of them do stand out of the most difficult, the longest, the most scenic. I can tell you one race I did in Switzerland where I'm climbing over the mountain, and we started at midnight, so the sun was rising, and yes, I'm in a race, but you know what? I'm never going to see the sunrise on this mountain ever again. So I stopped, I took off my pack, and I just enjoyed the sunrise for 10 minutes in Switzerland, which I don't know how high that was, and there's many stories like that. And you too, Jodi, you running in the desert and stuff like that, right?
Yeah, lots of memorable. As far as the toughest, it would probably actually be one of the 50Ks, just because it's just endless climbing. We live in a fairly flat part of Canada. We don't have mountains, so it's tough for us to train for mountain races because we can't get the vert. So when we go to those mountain races, you're climbing for 2 or 3 hours, and the downhill's, pretty long too, and it beats you up. It beats up the muscle groups that you just can't train. So I think the mountain races have been the toughest for us. But I would guess, if I had to guess, I think we've both done over 100 races in total.
If you ask me the same question this time next year, my answer will be the hardest race I've ever done will be UTMB, because I know it's going to take me 40 hours to cross that finish line.
For those of us, I'm unaware what the UTB is. What is the UTB?
UTMB, Ultra
UTMB.
Trail Mont Blanc. So it's it's just over 100 miles, and it starts in Chamonix, France, and it touches Switzerland and Italy,
and then back to France.
And it's as we say, it's the Olympics of the ultra running.
Yeah, because
the world, because it's
every country's represented. There's 2,000 people running it. UTMB, if you Google that, in fact, it's happening right now. This race, it's live on YouTube. So
and the footage is unbelievable. It's like you're watching Tour de France. And in our sport, having coverage like that is very difficult.
In the mountains and everything.
Yeah, they do a great job. It will inspire you. I highly recommend you check it out.
And it's not easy to get to. It took me 7 years to get to this race because of qualifying. So yeah, this time next year, that will be my hardest race.
Well, in regards to, like, moving forward, if we look at let's quote it like your biggest dream race or your biggest event. Is there a specific event that you both want to compete in during your lifetime?
Well, mine was just recently happened in June. It took me 8 years to get to a race called Western States 100, which is in California. And here we consider that the Boston Marathon of ultra running, because everybody's trying to get there, and it's so difficult to get in. And again, it took me 8 years. And that was a dream race of mine, which I did complete. And then now UTMB next year will be another one of mine that I will complete. Those are my 2 dream races that I've been striving for so long to get to. Yeah.
I don't have a specific bucket list race, but when I'm choosing a big race, I look for where it's going to take me. So I like to travel to a race so that I can also enjoy the country.
We're going in,
Yeah, and the next race that we're doing actually is based on, because we want to see the place, and that's in Cappadocia, Turkey. So we're going in October to do a 38K.
Yeah.
In regards to training, and let's say this is more specifically for people who don't know anything about ultra running or potentially are looking into it, how important is the footwear? Like, how do you know you have a good shoe for yourself?
Number one, it's really important to go to an independent running store that will fit you based on your foot type. That was our business for 8 years. I can't stress that enough. Don't go by brand. A lot of people say, oh, my friend wears Asics. I want to wear Asics.
or my coach told me to wear this shoe.
Yeah, it doesn't work that way. Our feet are as individual as we are. So you have to go to someone who can watch you walk, tell what type of foot you have, and then bring out 3 or 4 options. And the best advice I have, because people will ask, well, how do I know? If you can't feel the shoe on your foot, it's a good shoe for you. If you can feel the laces, if you can feel the top of the shoe or something in the heel or a funny bump under your arch, it's not going to work for you. Because it's like the princess and the pea. We feel everything through our feet.
Mm-hmm.
So if you can't feel the shoe, it's probably going to work for you. But it is really important to get fitted.
And there's a difference between road shoe and trail shoe. And some people mix that up.
Yeah, because I actually, what did I buy? I think I bought just some Under Armour shoes, like Hover Sonics. And when I first began running in them, and actually my running style was I would land heel first, and I ended up getting plantar fasciitis. I don't know if it was because of the shoe or if it was because of the heel strike. So I had to like buy a new shoe, like get it fitted and learn how to run, because I think like the technique itself to actually run takes skill and practice. So how did you both learn how to run?
Well, it's funny. That's the good question, because we forget how to run as adults. But when we're kids, around before the age of 10, we're running perfectly with great form. And then all of a sudden we forget.
Yeah, it's true.
So that's what we did with our clinics is teaching people how to learn how to run again. And how they do that is, if you remember as a kid playing leapfrog or hopscotch or skipping, just where do you land? You're not going to skip landing on your heel. Okay? Where do you land? That's how you run. That's the basic way.
Yeah. No, I love that. And soon I hope we can go into just like a generic training program so people can like get an understanding of what it actually takes for the athlete before they even get to the start line. But before that, I just want to ask, personally, what is more difficult, training or the run itself?
You got good questions.
I think the training, because hopefully you arrive at the race, and when you're at the race, it's all mental. If you've trained your body to the point where you're able to do the distance, and now is a head game. So I think the training's harder because you're fitting it in around your life, early mornings, or you're not having that second pint on the Saturday night because you're getting up in the morning to do a long run. So I think the training's definitely harder.
Training's definitely harder because things happen. Life happens. You get injured.
Yes.
And your race is 6 months away, and now it's playing a mental game on you. You got to kind of figure that out. You got to cross train. But hopefully it all works out that on race day, that's when you peak. Yeah.
Let's say you're heading into a 100K run? Just like a generic, what would you consider like a generic training protocol that you would expect anyone to be partaking in if they are doing a 100K event? And this is just for myself, but also for the listeners who don't know what it actually takes, I think, to actually just to get to the race itself.
Well, in training, when you run training for a marathon, you're not going to go run a marathon distance before you run the marathon. It's the same thing in 100K. Your longest run is going to be 5-6 hours, but multiple times.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas the 100K race could take you 24 hours to run this thing. So it's a matter of training your body that way, where one day you're going to go out for a 5-6 hour run, and then the next day you'll probably do a 3-hour run. Now you're running tired, and it's muscle memory that way.
Mm.
So that's the smartest way to train for a 100K race, is a lot of long distance running
Back to back.
back to back.
Back to back is key.
Yeah.
And I think too, if you have enough time, like let's say you're going to do that in 6 to 8 months, build in a 50K race somewhere along the way that it fits into your schedule, because a 50K race, it doesn't mean you're racing, but you're taking advantage of aid stations. You're taking advantage of a marked course. You're taking advantage of all the things that come with the race. And it's kind of like a free training day for you. So I think putting yourself in that position of, let me see how 50K feels at this point in my training and take it from there, is a good idea too.
Right. The 50K is not going to be your race day. That is your training day on a race course.
Yeah.
Yeah. Save yourself for the race.
In regards to training, do you both find it more beneficial to train alone, or do you like to train with others, like running with others? And maybe you don't talk, but just being amongst others and finding like inspiration from each other?
Well, for us personally, because let's say I'm training for a 100-miler and Jodi's training for a 100K or a 50K, I would go out early. I'm going to go run for 3 or 4 hours, and I'll meet you at this trail, and then she goes and runs with me for 3 hours. So now I'm already 3 or 4 hours tired, and now we're running the same pace where she's fresh. So we both get in our runs that way. We both a long run together.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
If I have to run with anyone, it would be Norm, because we don't actually talk, and we're okay with that. More so for me, I don't like to put pressure on someone to either run my pace, whether it's faster or slower than them, or the pressure to talk. Some people feel like they just have to talk all the time, and that's just not my the way that I do it. So I would prefer to run alone, or like Norm said, we would kind of split the training up and meet up halfway, and then that way I don't feel bad that he's now running a little slower because he's tired.
But I guess that's the training for long runs. But as far as track workout or tempos, I prefer to run with somebody because that pushes you. That's the whole point of those type of workouts. But on long runs, I'm fine by myself for 5-6 hours. Yeah.
You spoke about it earlier, just commenting on how like the body shapes of ultra runners are different, right? Like this, what you would generically think as a runner isn't actually like a runner. And there was a guy here in New Zealand. He ran, I think it was like 161 kilometers for I Am Hope, which is a mental health charity. And this guy was, I think, like a general population would say he's kind of like overweight. So like I find that interesting, the fact that people can run ultra marathons but look like they don't even like work out.
Mm-hmm.
How much of it is physical and how much of it is just mental?
Well, if you got time for a quick story.
Absolutely.
This is a true story. I was running this race called Crulee in Georgia. And at the beginning of the race, this guy had a huge pack, about 40 pounds. He himself must have been 200 pounds. So He's about 240 with the pack.
Wow.
And everything was dangling off it. And I thought, this guy is going to destroy himself. And at the start of the race, everything fell out of his pack. So I'm helping him put everything in. And I said, are you good? Yeah, I'm good. So the two of us started at the very last. It was a 90K race or something, Cruel Jewel?
Yeah.
I don't remember. But I did not see him for 15 hours later until finally he came into the last aid station with me, and I was in shock. I thought this guy was long. I'll never see him again.
Yeah.
Sure enough, there he was. And we had about 10K left to the finish line, and we kept leapfrogging each other. Now, this guy was 240 with his pack. And then finally, at the very end, he sprinted and he beat me by 10 minutes, knocking me out of 10th place. And to this day, I can't sleep. But I want to find this guy because I underestimated him. And I will never do that again.
Yeah.
I will never underestimate someone the way they look at the start line. No way.
No, you can't. Age too. Like,
oh my God.
Right?
Never underestimate someone's age.
No, you just can't. And that's the beauty of the sport as well. Where else do you get to run with professionals?
Oh, yes.
There's professionals that are toe to toe at the start line. Now, it's not a well-paid sport, but still, it doesn't exist, as far as I know, in any other sport where you get to be on the same course at the same time as a professional. So,
and share the same stories.
Right.
Yes. Yes.
Is there something about, and obviously this is my perception, you could correct me on this, but I often see that there's a lot more older people doing the sport of ultra running. I'm curious to know, like, in your opinion or your perspective from your experience, is there something about just an older person's body that allows them to adapt more to ultra running, or is it just a mentality thing?
I personally think it has something to do with the amount of training time, the amount of time that people have as they get older because they don't have small children or they have flexible work hours that they can dedicate more time to their training. I'm sure that there is something physiology-wise that can contribute, but I think it's a time thing because if you think about Ironman, the average age of an Ironman's pretty high too, and I think it's because they just have more time to dedicate to training.
I think also that you kind of get burnt out from 10Ks and marathons, especially when you're 20s and 30s. You're constantly looking for speed and time and splits. And then finally, when you're not reaching those that you used to, you switch. You shift into something longer. And then you realize, wow, I can do this too. And I can go much longer. And it's a whole new sport, I think. They just changed sport, basically.
Yeah.
That's
true.
Have you both had to manage? Okay, so I'll give an example. When I was running, let's say at the peak of the running, I loved it so much that I just continued running so much that I developed what do you call it? Shin splints.
Oh yeah.
And then and then I loved it so much that I'd continue running, and I got stress fractures.
Oh.
And then I kept running, and then I would tape my shoes up, like I would tape everything up and keep running, and I couldn't stop. And I don't know what changed my mentality and what allowed me to stop. But have you both personally or come across someone who has suffered with something like that or experienced something like that? The fact that they love it so much that even though they're injured, they just keep pushing through?
All the time.
Yeah.
We know lots of people like that. And I think it's partly because, like I was saying before, what the running does for your body. So whether it's physical or mental, I think a lot of people relieve stress through running, and you're addicted to that relief, the endorphins that come out and help you work through a problem or just vent and get over a bad day. So when you get that feeling, it's like, well, I need that. I need to do that again. So I'm just going to keep pushing through. I think a lot of people, just, I don't know. It's a personality type too that I think is very common in ultra running. That type A who is, has to have the training no matter what, and an injury, they don't either pay attention to it until it's too bad or gotten to the point. I'm the opposite. As soon as I get a little pain, I'm at the physio, I'm at the chiro, because I've had every running injury known to man, and I want to get on it, and I know that my body takes a long time to heal. But I think what you're describing is very typical in ultra running.
And this happened to you when you just started running, right?
I would say midway through that experience I was having, because I jump back and forth. Like I'll do boxing, and then maybe I'll do like some type of MMA, and then I'll do running, and then I'll do like weightlifting. So I'm like that. So I've probably done it for about a year and a half. So it was probably in the middle when that happened.
Mm-hmm. I basically what you're describing is that if I were to look at you, you're probably not efficient. You're mostly heel striking, probably what the problem was. But if you're getting in and out and you're not having someone look at you, then you're basically starting fresh every time.
Yeah, the consistency.
Yeah, you have to be consistent.
For sure.
Just think of a baseball player sprinting to first place, resting, sprinting to second. That's injury.
Right.
Yeah.
That's injury.
Yeah, for sure.
And were you sprinting? Were you doing speed drills?
Yes.
Yeah, that's a common. See, there you go. I think
it was
without even just meeting you, I kind of figured it out.
It was around the lake too. I think it's a 4K lap, and I would just give everything I've got, like I'm running for my life.
You're trying to beat your time from the last time, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. See, don't do that. Don't do that.
Yeah.
You incorporate speed in your workout, but only once a week, maybe. Yeah, but you need to get on a program, and you'll have much better results.
A lot of new runners also only run one speed, which is an injury waiting to happen. Yeah. You have to run slower when you're going further, and so there's
5 speeds in running.
What are the 5 speeds?
Oh boy, I know you're gonna.
Well, you mentioned it. You better.
Let me think. Long run, easy run, tempo, sprint, and something else. Yeah.
Yeah. But they all play a role. They all play a role.
They all have a role. And at the end of the training, you are ready. You are race ready.
How has ultra running impacted you mentally outside of ultra running? Like what? When you've obviously you've done all these ultra marathon events, so what have you been able to take away from the experiences themselves, and how have you implemented them in your daily life?
I think when presented with a challenge, whether it be work or family or friends, I remind myself, hey, you ran 100 kilometers without stopping. That was hard. Less than 1% of the population has done that. So you could figure this out. I think it just makes you mentally stronger, because in ultra running, they say, if you're struggling, wait 10 minutes, you're going to feel better. And it's very true. If you're presented with a problem and you immediately react and it's the worst thing, then just take a breath, think through it, and you'll figure out a solution rather than jumping to conclusions. So I think it's made me mentally stronger for everyday life.
I think that goes into our business, our events that we put on, which is stressful. Mm-hmm. Having the events that we direct, and we keep telling us that, hey, wait a minute, we're ultra runners. This is come on, we could get through this.
Yeah, exactly.
This is nothing stressful. We just climbed this mountain that took us 20 hours.
Yeah. In regards to like race directing and being race directors, first of all, like, what is it like specifically to be a race director?
Well, we have 5 events in Ontario. They're all trail events, and we just created 2 new ones. So previously we only had the 3, but it's everything. So it's from creating the name, finding the route, bringing on sponsors.
They're getting the medals, getting the ribbon.
Yeah, the swag.
What do runners want when they sign up for a race?
That's our biggest thing, is we're trying to create the atmosphere, the experience for the runner. And how we do that is our knowledge based on events that we've taken part in. So if we go to an event and they had this really cool thing at registration, we're like, we could do that.
Yeah.
Or maybe alternatively, if it's like, wow, they didn't have a sign at the entrance to this race, like we almost missed it. Let's not do that.
Right.
So we kind of build it on.
We like what we like.
Yeah.
And what races don't have, we're like, oh God, I can't believe they didn't do that.
Yeah. So it's been great because it's helped us to build the atmosphere that we want to experience. Therefore, we think our runners will enjoy the experience because we're coming at it from
the runner and a director.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Both sides. Yeah.
What's the most enjoyable part about being a race director? Is it because obviously you're from start to finish, you're creating this event and then you're seeing it come to fruition. What process or like what part of that is the most enjoyable for you both?
I like coming up with the medal design and the swag item the best. I think that's one of my strengths. But being at the finish line and seeing people cross and get their medal is, for race day, that's the best reward, I think.
Yeah, it's the runner's reaction to having a great day. And especially when people come to our race who've never done an ultra running before. And it's just amazing stories that we get to chat with them about on our podcast, and that just be the whole experience. And personally, I enjoy creating the course. I try to create a course that is difficult to give some people, they want difficulty, and then also able to runnable, something that's runnable. Because I hate being in a race that you just have to hike the thing.
I've never done trail running before, but I've heard other people. I've heard because I'm in a like a New Zealand ultra running Facebook group, and they do like meetups, and this was actually about a week after I'd done I think it was like maybe a 89k 90k run. They were doing, I don't know how long it was, but it was a trail run in the Hakarimatas, which is in Tauranga. And they said, no, like, even though I have like some ultra running experience, it would be too difficult and not safe for me to do that. So what makes trail running so difficult?
Well, it would have to be the terrain, I would assume. I assume in New Zealand, the terrain is pretty technical, whether it's rocks, roots, steep inclines or declines. How long was the run that you were wanting to do with them?
It was over 100 for sure.
Okay.
I think that's what they did say, like the terrain, and it was just dangerous because there's no one in sight. You can't just, drive an ambulance up there if someone has a fall.
Yeah.
Well, they may have a point.
I kind of, even in saying that, like it was humbling for me. Like it's even humbling for me now, like hearing you speak about my running form, and I wish it was something that someone had told me earlier. But then also it was humbling to know that even though I had just ran 90k, like there's still levels to this game. And how do you both go about like safety? How do you, obviously you can't make the entire race safe, but what precautions do you put in place for the athletes? And have there been any major injuries?
We've had minor. The most common is when people fall and then they bump themselves and they
Right.
scrape, so they're bleeding a little bit. We've had lots of ankle sprains. So the thing is because we don't live in an area where you have to take it a little more seriously. If a road runner comes to a trail race and they haven't trained on trail in a while, when you're running road, you're not looking on the path the whole time. Your mind can wander on a road because you don't have to worry about tripping over anything. But on trail, you should be looking 6 to 8 feet in front of you and picking your line of where you're going to put your foot. And if you're not paying attention to that, it's so easy to hit a root and roll your ankle. That's the most common. I think the only serious injury that we've had was actually heat exhaustion. So we had a race in May, and it's unusual at that time of year for it to be really hot, but it was really hot and humid. And it was a short distance. It was a 10K. So this particular runner was very fit, but it is early in the season, and he went out a little too hard, and I don't think he was drinking enough, so he suffered some heat exhaustion. But if you're talking about mountains, it's a lot more serious. You're talking wildlife, so bears
And
cougars.
weather change. Yeah,
You're talking
it happens.
weather changes. You could have a front move in and all of a sudden the temperature drops.
I don't know if you're aware that happened a few years ago, 3 years ago in China.
Yes, in China.
22 runners or 21 runners died during one race,
In an ultra
Wow.
race.
in an ultra race. Yeah, because they were high on the mountain and the weather's changed rapidly and they died.
Wow.
So that can happen, and that is
Wow.
extreme.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's extreme. Yeah, for
In
sure.
terms of the like hydration and nutrition, and we can just be like brief and maybe just generic. Like for those listening, what would you typically see an ultra runner eating during an event? Like let's say it's a 100K race. How often would they typically eat, and what would they be eating?
McDonald's, shakes, and Big Macs.
Not quite.
Well, real food, basically. Real food. My go-to food is peanut butter and jam sandwiches. I could eat that all day for 24 hours during a race. And when you get to the night section, it's a cup of soups, noodles, broth.
Yeah, it's all about salt and carbs.
Yeah.
And real food in an event like that is over, let's say, 8 hours is important because your gut can't absorb a gel or a chew or whatever, or a granola bar over so many hours, and you're going to have gastro issues. So real food tends to work better. So salty things like potato chips and pretzels and potatoes, sandwiches. You'll see fruit. Fruit is big, especially if it's hot.
It's like a buffet.
Yeah, it is.
When you get to an aid station, it's like, wow, where do I start?
And you should be consuming something every hour. It may just be a half of a PB&J sandwich, but you should be trying to consume every hour. And drinking, we like to drink every 20 minutes, but everybody's different and everybody has different needs that way. But the most important thing is to try all sorts of things and see what works best with your tummy, and don't change anything on race day.
Mm-hmm.
If you find something that works and they don't have it at your aid station, you better bring it, because you don't want to be trying something new, because it will mess you up. It could take you out of the race.
I did a race in 2010 called Leadville 100 in Colorado. I lost 14 pounds in that race because I wasn't
wow.
I wasn't taking my diet seriously. And then Jodi saw me come out of the woods. She thought she was looking at a skeleton. Yeah, I lost 14 pounds and I DNF'd because my nutrition was way off. And then I went back 4 years later, smarter, and I actually had the exact same weight from start to finish.
They actually weighed him at this race. For safety wise, just to make sure that your electrolyte level is working.
Yeah.
And that's how he knows 14 pounds. Weren't you over in one race too? You gained?
I gained weight in another race
Which is good.
because my nutrition was bang on.
Yeah.
And my race was great because of that.
What are you hydrating with specifically, and does it change over the course of the run?
I could pretty much drink anything that the race provides. I know some people can't, but I know there's some formulas out there like Tailwind is a lot of calories. So you're drinking your calories rather than eating it.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's people can just go on Gatorade. I don't like it much, but yeah, it's something that you have to figure out before race day.
And as far as changing throughout the race, Cokes taste really good on a hot day, like maybe 6 hours in when you're tired of the electrolyte flavor. And ginger ale, if your stomach is a little bit upset, ginger ale helps to calm it down. So I think it does change because the taste in your mouth changes too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's very specific. Like I won't drink Coke until much later in the race because I don't want that sugar high. And then I'm going to constantly crave it. So I wait till about, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 hours before the finish line. And then I'll start drinking Coke because now I'm getting a sugar rush to get me to the finish. So it's strategy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Could either one of you like take me into your world during one of the most difficult runs you've competed in? Like, how are you feeling? What are you thinking? Like, just where are you?
I think I'm gonna let you do that one.
Yeah. There's some runs that I've done where you really self-doubt yourself because you're climbing forever, which again, we don't have mountains here in Ontario, but for me to go from here to a race starting at, let's say, 10,000 feet, starting at 10,000.
Yeah.
Okay, so right now I can't breathe right off the bat. I'm already at disadvantage. And then having to climb higher than that. So as I'm climbing, I'm thinking, what am I doing? Why am I doing this to myself? I'm just self-doubt. So that does play on your mind. But then when you cross the finish line, you're signing up for the next race the next day. It's like you totally forget what you just did. So there are races like that where...
And how about when you're feeling bad and you just have to remind yourself that stick it out, you're going to feel better.
Yeah, there was a race I did in Zion in Utah for 6 hours. My stomach would just not settle for 6 hours, but I'm thinking to myself, well, I know that I'm going to be here for 24 hours, so 6 hours. I just kept trying to get through it, and finally it settled. And yeah, then in the end,
and then you felt fine.
Then I felt fine. It's just you have to get over it. So this is different variables. Sometimes I run into snowstorms. Sometimes I run into heat exhaustion, like I did at Western States, which was 110 degrees, and I'm 110. We left here when it was what, 5? So you just put your body through so much stress, and then I can go on. I got too many stories for this podcast.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. Jodi, you briefly touched on it earlier in the podcast, but I was hoping you could just give people listening like a sense. I feel like there's like these common traits potentially amongst ultra runners and just how's the energy, how's the atmosphere the morning of the run, during the day, after the run? What are some common traits that you've found amongst ultra runners? And could you just share that whole celebration and energy with those of us listening?
Absolutely. I find that ultra running races, especially, they're much more laid back. So you don't have the loud music. You don't have all the sponsors around. You don't have the rah. It's very laid back, which is great because I think it's something that people enjoy, that atmosphere of not having the pressure and not having the adrenaline rush because you're in it for a long time. One thing about ultra runners in general is that they acknowledge the fact that, he's been training for 6 months. I've been training for 6 months. We've all put a lot of effort into being here, just showing up to a race of this magnitude. It's a lot of effort. So when something goes down on the course, these guys are the first to help. They put their race aside. If you need help, they're going to stop and help you. And that doesn't happen in a lot of other events. You won't find that attitude. At our last race that we put on, there was a runner who was looking for a salt tab. And unfortunately, we didn't actually have any at the aid station. And I asked one of the other runners who happened to be coming in at that time, because it was a looped course. I said, hey, he overheard me. He goes, I've got salt. Just go into my pack and give her what she needs. And I think that that builds community. And I think that's what runners who attend these kind of events are also drawn to, the community aspect, because obviously over COVID, we lost community. We weren't able to participate in races for at least 2 years. And the last few that we've been at, people are just so happy to be back. There's been less complaining about anything. They're just happy to be there. They're happy that there's a race to go to. And they're happy to see their friends, because it really is a smaller community as well. When you show up at an ultra running event here, you're going to know at least one other person, at least, if not multiple, because there aren't that many people that are running that kind of a distance. So community is key, I feel.
I just noticed that when I was road running, when I finished a marathon, the first question I would get asked by my friends is, what was your time? But in ultra running, the first question you ask me is, how did you do? So that's just different. Like, as if my time represents the race or how I did. Yeah, it's just a different time, a different mindset like that.
Yeah, that's true.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I've run so I've ran like this week a few times, and there's a guy, and he does ultra marathons, and it's cool. Like, just I've seen him a couple of times this week, and we sort of acknowledge each other. Like, I acknowledge him and he acknowledges me, and I think I do love that about ultra runners, and I love their, obviously, like, it's generic, but I love their mentality, and I love their personality. They always seem so calm, open, free, but that there's another side to them that you probably you're not going to see unless you're with them during a race. So at the end of every podcast, I like to ask 2 final questions, and I'll ask Jodi. I'll ask you, Norman.
Oh no, pressure.
and this is more about self-celebration and to allow us to celebrate with you. So I want to ask you, what are you most proud of doing in this life?
Wow, that's a big one.
It's so funny because we ask the same type of questions,
right,
on our podcast, but we never answer them ourselves.
Yeah.
How about you go first, Joe? Let me think of it.
He didn't ask me. He asked you.
Okay, can you repeat the question?
What are you most proud of doing in this life?
Most proud. That's a tough question. I gotta help me out here, Joe. That's a tough question. Most proud of.
How about you, Jodi? And I'll ask Norman the second question. So what are you most proud of doing in this life? And it could just be to today, it might change tomorrow, but what are you most proud of doing in this life?
I think it's a couple of things, but I'm proud of facing fears, because when I met Norm, I wasn't the most adventurous person, and there was something about him that I felt like I wanted him to be proud of me. So he wanted to jump out of a plane. I didn't, but I did it because he wanted to do it. But when I did it, I was really glad that I did. And it made me acknowledge that, hey, you were afraid to do this. I was petrified, but I did it anyway. And I was really glad I did. There aren't too many things that we've done as a couple that I regret doing. So now I feel like when I'm afraid to do something, I remind myself of that. And I said, well, you can't judge it until you try it. So I'm proud that I have faced many fears over the years, whether they're physical or not. A lot of them are physical related just because I was a big scaredy cat as a kid. So I think that's what I'm personally most proud of.
See, that's a good answer. I don't have that answer.
That was beautiful. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that with us. I really appreciate hearing that. So,
Okay,
Norman,
take it easy on me on the second question.
Norman, what is your hope for the world and future generations?
Oh gosh, hope for the world and future generation. That's a loaded one too.
Things have changed a lot since we were kids.
Yeah. But have they? I hope that the world is a much safer place to travel because that limits us from exploring.
Mm.
And especially for the younger generation, not able to get to places that we've been to and you can no longer get to. I hope that they, not so much on the career, but just to take a step back and take a good look around what is around, because
what's important.
I understand, yes, of course, education and career is fine, but you need to explore your surroundings, and I hope the younger generation sees that and get off Instagram because it's so fake.
Yeah. I'm saying that most days.
Instagram life, it's you know what? Instead of just looking at a picture on Instagram, why don't you go there? Why don't you go there and see it for yourself, what it's all about? You know, instead of giving it a thumbs up. There you go. How did I do?
You're doing great. Thank you for sharing. Appreciate it. All right, Norman and Jodi, gottarunracing.com. I appreciate both of you for your time. Many blessings, much love, and may your lives continue to flourish.